fellow guitar travellers, it's Rowan J. Parker here and welcome to another YouTube video. Now as you can see today, no guitar, only an air guitar I have today. So this is not going to be a playing video, rather this is going to be a video which focuses upon a subject which is dear to the hearts of all you working musicians, all you gigging musicians out there, and all of those of you who are studying to become professional musicians, is how can you make a living out of music? Well, I've been a professional full-time musician for the last 20 years and music has been my only source of income. So I'm going to share with you some of the things that I've done and some of the ways in which I make a living for myself. And if you really are set on going down this route, you can do this as well. Alright, so stay tuned, lots of good tips coming up. Here we go. Now, one of the ways you can help me make a living out of music is to visit my website, www.rowanjparker.com, and buy something from my website store. There's lots of very cool products there at very reasonable prices. I'm only joking. Only buy something if you really want to buy it. So let's get down to serious business. How are you actually going to make a living? When I was about 17 or 18 and I said to my parents, I want to have a career in music. This is what I want to do. I want to play the guitar. I got the very standard response from my stepdad at the time. He's like, well son, how are you going to make a living? That's not a real job, etc, etc, etc. For those of you that don't speak Scots, what he said was, that's not a real job, how are you actually going to make a living? And at the time I had absolutely no idea how indeed I was going to make a living out of it. I really had no idea at all, but I knew that the only thing I wanted to do with the rest of my life was play guitar. So needs must, and there had to be some other way or some way found that I could make a living. So one of the things I'll tell you right away that is to be a full-time musician is not necessarily an easy financial choice. It's don't expect to make a lot of money out of being a full-time musician. You'll have a lot of freedom and creativity and be able to run your own life, but is it going to make you rich? Not unless you're incredibly lucky. But nevertheless, with a bit of careful management, you can in fact get yourself a reasonable income, certainly enough to survive on. So we'll talk about the various ways in which you can make money, and I'll split these up into two different categories really, of one being money that you can make from music education and one that you can make from actually performing. So let's look at education first. Now most of my career, or my so-called career, has been spent in music education, and the primary reason for that is that's what I really enjoy doing. It's really the function that I think I'm the very best at, and it's really what I get the most satisfaction from. So that's what I do for the majority, even though I have had a long career as a player as well. So some of the things to recommend to you about developing some sort of income stream from music education is that it tends to be a lot more stable than being a player, because when you're a player you move from gig to gig and it's however long that particular job lasts and then it's over and you need to find something else. Much like an actor has that problem at the end of a movie, they need to move on. That's not really the case with musical education. It tends to be more or less an ongoing thing, especially if you end up working for an organisation. So here are some of the ways that you can make money through music education. One of the primary and probably the easiest ways to get into it if you're just starting out is to develop a little private teaching practice of your own. You don't really require that many students to start making a worthwhile little income. Say as little as 5 students will start, adding to your income and start paying some of the bills. And if you can develop it, then you can actually develop a very good, satisfying, thriving little music practice. And that's what I did initially when I moved back to Glasgow in 1995. I focused on developing a private music practice, and pretty much until around about 2000 when I started working for Yamaha, that's what I did more or less. The only downside with having private students is that private students can come and go. Maybe they're going to cancel on you, maybe they can't come this week. It can be a good idea if you also have a source of income from, say, a music school that you work for. So for instance, in the UK I work for Yamaha Music Schools. I'm a Yamaha teacher, and that is a different strand or source of income, a different set of students, different location. And so one of the things to say at this point is it's very important that you have different strands to your income. If you rely on one thing and that one thing goes down the toilet, you're stuffed. You're totally stuffed, right? You need to have at least 4 or 5 different sources of income, and then things start getting a bit more stable, because if one thing drops off, well, you've always got these other things to fall back on. And I have at least 5 different things which bring me some income, and it's now heading up to more like 10 different things. Some of these things don't earn me a lot of money, admittedly, but all put together, amalgamated, actually creates enough to make you be able to have a comfortable existence. So anyway, getting back to our teaching thing, we've got private teaching practice, which I strongly recommend you look into developing. Getting involved with some sort of private music school is also a good idea, because it can give you some wider exposure and possibly training and other forms of stability. The other thing you can do in the UK is you can work for the local authority and become what's called a peripatetic or peri-teacher, which is where you go into usually secondary schools and you deliver guitar tuition. Now, many of my friends and colleagues do this. It's personally something I don't do, and I've never wanted to do, mainly because I'm only prepared to teach people who really want to learn, and I find in that environment, when you have people who are not really that committed to the instrument, they're not bothered about learning, and you're really just there to babysit them for half an hour. I'm just not going to do that. So for my own sanity, I don't do peripatetic work. However, if I got really desperate, I probably would, but I don't do it. But it's another form of income, so you shouldn't discard any form of income, because you have to make a living, right? So we've got private students working for a private music school, peripatetic work. If you have the capability to do this, it is an idea to get yourself a website property, and you can produce products, books, things like that for your website and sell them through the website. Now I'll talk more about this later on in the video. The internet is an actual platform to try and get yourself noticed, but it's another way you can try and get yourself out there, get your products out there to a much, much wider audience. Now the benefit of that sort of approach is that, if you teach someone for an hour in your private lesson, then you deliver that lesson for 1 hour and then that is the lesson over. You're not going to get paid for it again. However, if you invest some of your time in developing, say, a book or a video or some PDF files or collection of licks or whatever it might happen to be, and then you can then put that on your website, and provided it's of good quality and it's popular, we can potentially sell that thing again and again and again and again. So you can make money multiple times from just one investment of time. So that, in terms of a business strategy, is an absolute no-brainer. The choice between either working for an hour, get paid for an hour, or investing a limited amount of time and then getting paid for it again and again and again seems to me a fairly obvious thing to do. So if you can do that, it's certainly something worth looking into. And of course, as technology evolves, you've also got things like smartphone applications and ebooks, and there's lots of other educational material you can get involved with. You can also end up working for big companies producing musical syllabi, which is something that I have done and am doing. So there's all sorts of possibilities for extra sources of income, and anything that can give you a reciprocal income or a recurring income from something that you only have to do once is absolutely, that's the goal, the holy grail, I think, absolutely the holy grail. So there's money to be made out of teaching, and it is, for the majority, a stable income. It's possibly not the most exciting lifestyle just to focus upon teaching, but it depends what your priorities are. If you want to go out and have a rock and roll life and play a lot of gigs, probably teaching is not for you. But if you're really into music education like I am, then absolutely it's very satisfying. Alright, so those are some of the ways we can make money out of teaching music. Let's look at now your career as a player, if you want to go down that route. So if you don't like the idea of teaching, or it's just something you don't feel you'll be able to do very well, then your other option is really to pursue a career as a full-time player. And a lot of my friends and colleagues, that's what they do, they play full-time. Which can be great fun, especially when you're young, because there's a good laughs to be had, plenty of beer to be drunk, some great gigs to be had, lots of good experiences. You can travel, especially if you end up in a big gigging band. You can travel all over the place, all over the country, all over the world. It's fantastic. The downside to it is that the income stream is, by its very nature, very unpredictable. You're only going to work as long as that particular job lasts, and when that show is over, boom, that's you out of a job, and you can be like an out-of-work actor twiddling your thumbs with nothing to do. And that's never really particularly appealed to me, to be honest. So that's why I've always taught and sort of played as a side thing. So anyway, different ways you can actually make money. Here is a reasonably stable way of making money. If you get yourself into a function band, wedding band, that sort of thing, then you can do, in your local area, you can do a lot of work, which is pretty stable, and you can work throughout the year. And there are a lot of people playing in those sorts of bands. So there are a lot of guys who are not, to be honest, fantastic musicians. good musicians, decent musicians, but making a perfectly respectable living playing in those sorts of function bands. And certainly I played in a function band for about 10 years, and much of that was quite good fun. The upside of doing that is that, the money is good and you get treated well. Weddings, I think I've eaten more buffets than you can possibly imagine, which is why I'm the size I am. And we've done a lot of, high-end corporate events and all that sort of stuff. It's all great fun, it's all cool. The downside is that you're playing music probably you as a musician, as an artist, don't really care for. There's only so many times you can play, say for instance, Brown Eyed Girl without going completely insane. So that is the downside of playing that sort of music, because the music that the general public want to hear probably isn't the sort of music you would really like to play. That's certainly the case with me. So, however, putting that aside, putting your own musical preference aside, it can be a good, stable source of income. Now, there are lots of other sources of income as a player. So here's another thing you can do. If you can get into doing session work, that can prove quite good. Though again, by its very nature, session work is very, very sort of, you go in for a day, do that job, and then boom, that job is over. When I was 19 years old, I did my first session work. I played on an album for a Scottish rock band called Highlander, and for me at the time that was great. It was well paid, and I've done various session work over the years. I haven't done so much of it, but I've done some of it, and it's always been fine. But again, the very nature of session work is a very finite thing. If you can read music, then you can do theatre gigs and you can back cabaret, and I've certainly done quite a bit of that as well. And again, it can be an ongoing gig, but usually it has a finite length of time. Or you can play in like show bands where you do like a run of shows. You do that show and then that show comes to an end, and so on. So, as a player, it's quite unstable. None of my friends, they play on the boats. They do, go away on cruises, and they're part of the house band that does the cruise. I mean, a lot of them just go from cruise to cruise to cruise, and they never really come home, which is, I suppose it's a lifestyle. It's great if you like it, but it didn't appeal to me at all. But again, the nature of it is unstable. So to make a career as a player is tricky, because you've got to really be continually looking for the next thing and the next thing and the next thing and the next thing. One of the good things about being involved in that sort of circle is, though, that as you sort of develop your reputation as a player, as a musician, and people get to know you and get to like you, well, you did a good job with this guy, he's going to recommend you to someone else when they're looking for a guitar player, and you get work that way through reference, through word of mouth, and it can all sort of build up that way. So it can be very, very positive, and you'll have a lot of good experiences, but the instability of the thing, especially when you're my age, is a bit of a problem, really. I'll talk a little bit about just the way you should behave if you're going to do this sort of thing. If you're going to go down the route as a player, or a teacher for that matter, there's probably some things that you definitely should do. And that is just things like how you conduct yourself, how you deport yourself. You'll find that in the music industry, there's some things that people care about, and there's some things that people don't care about at all. Here are the things that people do not care about. They don't really care about your qualifications. They don't care that you've got a music degree. Telling someone that you've got a music degree in the music industry really evokes no sort of response whatsoever, because people want to know whether you can play or not. And unfortunately, there are quite a number of people out there with music degrees who don't particularly play to that well at all. They've managed to get through the degree without that much ability. So for me, that's no barometer of whether someone can play or not. Generally, when you go for a job, it is by audition that you'll come and you'll play with a band, you'll sit in with a band, and if you can do the job, you've got the job. No one cares about your qualifications whatsoever. What they do care about is things like, are you reliable? Are you a nice guy? Will you go drinking with the boys? Are you easy to get on with? These sorts of things are far more important, really. So if you're an open and gregarious person, you like the company of other people and you can have a good laugh, then great, you'll get on well. If you find yourself a little bit shy, a little bit insecure, a little bit withdrawn, it's going to be a little bit difficult to make the contacts you need to make, because it is the music industry, the music business, which is really all about human interactions, and how you get on with people really, in the end of the day, is a lot to do with what establishes your reputation. Because to be honest, you don't need to be the most amazing, fantastic player to get in to play, with even some of the big guys. Some of the big guys, the players are great, some of them are not so great. But it doesn't matter. The thing is that you can do the job, you turn up, you're easy to get on with, you've got a professional attitude, you're just getting the job done. And the same thing applies if you're teaching. You really need to turn up in time for your lessons and make sure that you look presentable and you don't smell, and It's obvious things really. It's what I call professional deportment, and I think a lot of players in the industry, they ignore that, and at some level it maybe doesn't matter too much, but I think when the further up you go, it starts to matter more and more. So just treat it like it is a professional job, going with that attitude, and because so many other musicians won't have that attitude, you'll get the gig over them because you've got the right attitude. So that's quite important, I think. Alright, so I think I've waffled on enough about that. So let's look at briefly how the internet has changed things, because that's very interesting. Now, because I'm an old guy, I can remember a time when there was no internet. I know you find this hard to believe. There was no internet, there was no mobile phones. I mean, there was hardly electricity. I'm only kidding, there was electricity even back in the 1970s, which I can remember quite clearly. In fact, I remember the summer of 1976, very hot indeed. Anyway, the internet has completely changed everything, and we as yet only dimly discern the full ramifications that the internet is going to have on human society, but already it has changed things. You can see it's utterly destroyed some old businesses, but yet again new opportunities have arisen and new businesses have come and made huge amounts of money. What this really means to you is that it has given you a platform that you did not have before. So if you play to a reasonably good level and you've got something interesting to play and something interesting to say, you can use the internet as a platform for getting your message across to millions, billions of people who would not otherwise know you exist, because the very fact that you're watching this YouTube video means that, you know, I'm on this internet platform and you would never normally know who the hell I was. So it's extremely important that you kind of use this platform as a way of getting yourself out there. So the main platforms you can use are YouTube, social media platforms like Facebook, and also if you get your own website property. So what I would suggest you do is, if you play well enough and you've got something interesting to play and say, get yourself a YouTube channel, put up some YouTube videos, get yourself a website, get your website designed, and just use it to promote yourself, what you're doing. And if you've got some products on your website, you can use that as a platform to sell your stuff all over the world. So it's another way that you can make an income. And plus you can meet people that you would never normally come across. In the last year I have met and made quite good friends with people that normally I would never have come into contact with, and you can only see that developing and expanding as I continue to pursue this project. So to let you know, the internet for me is a very recent project. I've basically ignored it up to this point, but in the last year I've really gone for it in a big way, and yeah, it's been fantastic. I really have enjoyed it. It's a brand new thing for me. It's been very good for my guitar playing because it's forced me to practice a hell of a lot more than I think I otherwise would have done, and it's also led me to think about things in a slightly different way, and also think about how I present things when I'm doing my videos. So, internet as a platform for getting yourself, your message, your music, whatever it is, across to the general public. Absolutely recommend it. Okay, well, I think that will conclude this video on how to make a living out of music. My final words would be to say that it is possible. It's a precarious existence there, though. Don't expect to make huge amounts of money, not unless you're incredibly lucky. But it is a really worthwhile life, and it's got a lot of freedom attached to it. So if you're looking for that sort of thing, then by all means go for it. But just realise it's far from a 9-to-5 job with all its concomitant upsides and downsides. Alright, that will do. I will see you next time on another video. This is Round J Parker signing off. Farewell, and don't forget to visit my website www.roundjparker.com. Goodbye!